Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're here. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Kyle's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Dr. Joel Wallach is with us for hour number 1. Welcome, Dr. Joel Wallach.
Hello, Vincent. It's always a great pleasure and honor to be working with you one way or another.
I understand that you are in an airport ready to take off. Is that true?
That is correct. And so I will probably be able to stay with you until a quarter till the hour. You know, minutes from now.
Great. I'm delighted that you can do that. Yeah, Dr. Wallach, your schedule is really busy. You don't waste a single second of time. I've never seen you waste any time at all. You're always busy, busy, busy. And if you weren't healthy, you certainly couldn't do that. I'll tell you what, the average guy could not do it. I'm absolutely serious about that, class. Dr. Wallach, I had a question for you. Okay. And that is, I was thinking about something that I've noticed, that people are more tired than ever before. They complain about being tired more now. They're more lethargic. They're more obese, and we have more homosexuality than ever before. People are coming out of the closet. Now, either they were behind the closet door and it just swung open, or they're more homosexuals than ever before. Now, I know that we've had homosexuality, since the beginning of time, but is there a correlation among being
absolutely.
tired, being lethargic?
Well, you have to appreciate, Vincent, that what it takes for all vertebrates, whether you're an elephant or a crocodile or a flamingo or a human being or a rat or a pig or a dog, we require 90 essential nutrients, 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids, and we can no longer get these things out of our food. Without supplementation, you're going to be deficient in multiples of nutrients, not just one. You're not going to be deficient in vitamin C. Well, I take lots of vitamin C. Well, you got the other 89 to deal with, right? And just trying to get your nutrients in optimal amounts, and 90 essential nutrients by eating well, as doctors would tell you to do, is like putting dirt from Texas in your car instead of oil, hoping there's some oil in that dirt from Texas. No insane person would do that to their car, yet they do that to their kids and themselves. They just, quote, eat well and don't supplement properly to maintain everything they need. And, of course, this includes birth defects, all birth defects, which includes a spectrum of sexual dysfunction. There's a spectrum. And there is asexual people, okay? These asexual people, both males and females, we used to call them spinsters or old maids, that sort of stuff. And these people, you have to appreciate, when the sperm fertilizes the egg, you're instantly an XX female or an XY male. Sexually, you have all the equipment between your legs of that particular gender. But when it comes to who you're going to chase for sex and who you allow to chase you for sex is determined in a period between 3 and 7 weeks of pregnancy, the first, third, and 7 weeks of pregnancy. And it's development to the preoptic hypothalamus of the brain, which takes some time. If you're missing those nutrients, and we are, and that's why there's a spike in the appearance of these gender problems, not genetically, but behaviorally. And you get the asexuals, okay, again, which the LGBT, the lesbian, bisexual, and the transgenders and the gay males and lesbian females, they've added, and I've been doing this for 40-something years, is adding the asexual individuals to this spectrum. And then you get the bisexuals, which chase either sex and allow either sex to chase them. Then you have the heterosexuals, which is the more typical pattern you expect from all vertebrates. And then you get the lesbians, you get the you get the gay males and so on. And these are all a congenital event. I prefer to call it a congenital event where the embryos are missing things. Mom is not taking them. They're not supplementing. And I hold the OBGYNs responsible for this. The OBGYN should be getting young girls who are 6 years old to start supplementing before they get into the childbearing years. And so when the babies come, they're going to have the maximum chance of avoiding cleft palate and cerebral palsy and Down syndrome and heart defects and muscular dystrophy and all these things, which are simple nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. There are no genetic birth defects. That includes behavioral, gender things. And, of course, these kids know this when they're 2 years old. I mean, let's see here. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's little girl, Shiloh, 2 years old, knew that she was a boy. Same thing with the girl child of Sonny and Cher, Mono, became a male. And they knew this when they were 2 years old. We also had Bruce Jenner, knew when he was 2 years old, although he had all the equipment of a boy, in his brain he was a girl because mama didn't have all the nutrients during that development. And so he started hanging around with the boys, trying to be more boy-like because he wanted to be a boy because he had the equipment between his legs as a boy. And that's why he was such a great athlete, because he's training with the Pop Warner leagues and the Pee Wee leagues and stuff, and he's like 4 years old. And so he's one of the best trained athletes by the time he was 18 years old. But he never gave up knowing in his brain that behaviorally he was a girl. And we're having more and more and more of this. And, of course, you have locations in the world where these nutrients are really missing in the soil. Sodom and Gomorrah, San Francisco, places all over the world where, biblically, they knew that there was a large collection of these individuals because those nutrients were missing in the soil. Mama didn't get them when she was pregnant, and there was a high percentage of babies born with these sexual differences. So I hope that kind of puts you on the rails there.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I was thinking many years ago, I had the opportunity to be in San Francisco, and I ate at a restaurant on Fisherman's Wharf, and I'm thinking, as you're saying this, so Dr. Wallach, are you saying that those who live and eat foods in that are grown in that region or other regions that you mentioned are going to have these deficiencies, and that's why there are these clusters there?
That's correct. And when you look at upstate New York, we have one of the highest clusters of transgenders, both in the wild animals, particularly the white-tailed deer, and livestock, which we call free martins and cattle. Mm-hmm. Okay, you've heard of free martins, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And this is where you get the transgender. Bulls think they're cows, and cows think they're bulls. And because the nutrients are no longer in the soil, in upstate New York, there was a third of a page article in Wall Street Journal, I don't know, maybe a year ago about this. And they had pictures of transgender deer. They were does, and this guy shot it because you could tell by looking through the binoculars, it had a record set of antlers. And he shot that deer, and when he got up to it, he said, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble because it has antlers, has all the features of a male, but it was a girl." And so he, had to have special dispensation out of the state for shooting a female, but from 100 yards away from binoculars, it looked like a male. And so they have one of the highest rates of transgender deer in America is upstate New York, and they have one of the highest rates of transgender humans in upstate New York. For that reason, because this nutrients are missing in the soil.
Dr. Wallach, as you travel, you get to meet a lot of people. I'm sure if you look left or right, across or behind you at the airport where you are right now, you can observe lots of interesting characteristics that people are exhibiting. Can you share with us what you see wrong with people today, just from a glance? Can you see what they're doing wrong?
Yeah, just from a glance. You can see what they're eating, and of course, eat a lot of bad foods, fried foods. They eat too much sugar. They will drink too many soft drinks. They shouldn't drink any, but they're drinking 3 and 4 soft drinks in an hour while they're waiting for an airplane. And they eat a lot of oil, salad dressings, cooking oils, those kinds of things. And one of the things that shows up, one of the things you can tell, and when I'm giving a lecture, I just gave a lecture last night to 200 people, this was a beautiful event in Baltimore, Maryland. And you look into the audience, of the 200 people, you see 50 of them that have really rosy cheeks. They look like drunk Irishmen. So they have this rosacea on their cheeks. And, a doctor might diagnose them with lupus if they have musculoskeletal things going along with that. It's a deficiency of a single nutrient, and usually you get respiratory problems with it. There's rosacea, and you'll get asthma and bronchitis and COPD. And it's a deficiency of a single nutrient, but you can see it from 50 feet away. And I'm always fascinated by that. And I ask these people, are you coloring your hair? Because their hair will be, their normal color. Say, yeah. And they have white, grayish silver hair, and they're wearing wigs, or they're coloring their hair. And this is something you can see from 25, 30, 40, 50 feet away. It's not something you have to do a blood test on or do a hair analysis or anything. And so people always wonder, well, how did you know? Because I ask them questions. Did you have asthma when you were a kid? Well, I've had asthma all my life. And, well, how did you know? Because I could ask him any question. First time I ever met him, why did I ask him about asthma? Because they have this rosacea. They have this red cheeks like a drunk Irishman. And that's because they're deficient in that one nutrient, and they're going to be deficient in others that kind of coincide with that. And these people will also have the same people will have skin problems, eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis. In the biblical days, there were two types of leprosy. One was a wet leprosy, which was caused by mycoplasma, the bacteria that causes tuberculosis. And so wet leprosy, which makes up 10% of leprosy, is a skin tuberculosis. 90% of what they used to call dry leprosy in the Holy Land back in the old Bible days was just this deficiency of these two nutrients. It's kind of like a plaque psoriasis today. Back then they called it leprosy, and I had pictures of people who were like 75% covered with their body. They would have been stoned to death in biblical days because people would look at that as leprosy. And so we know that was going on back then in Bible days. And because they're describing the diseases, which still have the same description today. This is all due to a gluten intolerance. 95 to 98% of people are gluten sensitive, not sensitive to wheat, but they're sensitive to gluten. You can do a wheat test on them, and they're not allergic to wheat, but they are sensitive to gluten in the wheat. And they have all these problems. So you have to get them off of bad foods, no fried foods, no processed meats, no oils, no glutens. Get them on the 90 essential nutrients, like the Healthy Start Pack, where you throw in a little bit of extra, the secret sauce for the things they're missing. And it all goes away, Vincent. It all goes away.
Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. And I'm going to come back, and I've got some questions about psoriasis. I know some people have had it, and they just can't shake it. And I think we've got the answer right here. Let's talk a little bit more about psoriasis. Dr. Joel Wallach. We'll be right back. Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. Dr. Wallach, you'd mentioned psoriasis, and we were talking about gluten intolerance and leprosy. Now, I know two people who fly a lot. One is a few years older than the other. That would be you. You're a few years older than this other man. This other man works for an insurance company, and he literally flies, and he has an extremely high-pressured occupation. I wouldn't say there was any more stress in his life than you have in your life, because you both are on the go. You both are subject to being in the aluminum tubes for hours upon hours and waiting and delays and lost luggage and all those things, plus the schedule and the meeting, and you're on stage, multiple times a day. And he's under fire multiple times a day as well in the insurance industry. He's upper management. The difference is he has psoriasis and you don't. And
okay, well, psoriasis, as we said, Vincent, is a simple nutritional deficiency, almost always, 99% of the time, secondary to gluten intolerance, because the nutrients that are missing are big and clumsy and very difficult to absorb under ideal circumstances. But when you have injuries to your intestine and you've lost, say, 50%, 70% of your absorptive efficiency, and you're down to 10, 15, 20% absorption efficiency, you cannot absorb these big nutrients. And so you're a prime case. And you're seeing more and more on advertisement on TV for these psoriasis medications. They tend to be cortisone-type things. They're trying to relieve the inflammation. But don't cure psoriasis, like trying to cure scurvy with aspirin. If you want to cure scurvy, you got to give them vitamin C. It's like trying to cure rickets with aspirin. It might get rid of the pain in the bowed legs, but you're not going to cure rickets without vitamin D3. The same thing with psoriasis. You relieve some of the pain and some of the inflammation with the drugs they're taking, but you'll never get rid of the disease because it's a deficiency of a couple of nutrients. And then you throw in a deficiency of some other nutrients that it makes it even more complicated. And so what we like to do for psoriasis, of course, is get them gluten-free. And within 60, 90 days, you can get a significant healing. Not perfect yet, but you get enough healing to where there may be up to 75%, 80% absorption. And you give them the 90 centinutrients, something like the Healthy Start Pack or the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. And then you throw in the secret sauce here for these sorts of things. And within, 60, 90 days, it just totally goes away. And you have to stay on these programs forever because these nutrients that will prevent and reverse psoriasis are no longer found in the food. That's the problem. They're not found in. I don't care if you spend $1,000 a meal. You're not going to get the nutrients because they're not in the food. And this is why we're having these epidemics of these sexual behavioral problems. We're having epidemics of psoriasis. We're having, right now we're the number one obese nation in the world because obesity is a deficiency disease. It's not really lack of exercise and eating too much. And so we don't have these nutrients in the food. We must supplement. Forget it. There's no way you can eat well. Even if you're working in your own garden, you can't. You must supplement, and then whatever you get from the food is value added.
I'm going to forward a link to... I'm going to forward a link to this broadcast to this man I know because he's been suffering with psoriasis for as long as I've known him, and that's darn close to 40 years. What he found out was he could get some temporary relief if he went to the ocean and spent some time in the sun and in the salt water. But there was no complete relief. It was just a small portion of relief for a short time.
He'll get some minerals out of the ocean water. Yeah, he'll get some minerals out of the ocean water, which will help. But the bigger nutrients, as he learned, he's not going to get total resolution, even briefly, because the big things that cause psoriasis are the same things that cause rosacea on the face, dermatitis, eczema, impetigo, those kinds of things are all caused, and they're a little different. They have a third or fourth deficiency, which make it impetigo instead of psoriasis, so it makes it psoriasis instead of dermatitis. But they're all related because the basic underlying deficiency is found in all of them. And so when you get it all right, get rid of all the bad inflammatory foods, the fried foods, the processed meats, the oils, and glutens, wheat, butter, and oats, and then you supplement with the 90 essential nutrients, it will always go away, and they'll stay away as long as you stay on that regimen.
Is there a link between psoriasis, for example, and smoking? Does smoking cause the preventing of absorbing nutrients that the body needs, and maybe psoriasis results? Is there a link there?
It's a very, what you say, bizarre link because when people smoke, they're deficient nutrients. And
hold that thought. We'll be right back. Class Dr. Joel Wallach is with us, and we were talking about psoriasis, and I asked a question about smoking and smoking inhibiting our ability to absorb the nutrition that we need for our bodies to do well. And is there a link between smoking, psoriasis, and the lack of absorption of nutrition? Dr. Wallach, we're going into a break. Please help us with that.
Okay. There's an indirect relationship. Smoking is not causative to psoriasis. But the same thing that results in psoriasis can initiate the desire for something. When a horse or a cow is deficient, they're going to start cribbing. They're going to chew on the fence. They're going to eat dirt, that sort of thing. They're looking for something. They know their body's telling them you got to get this, but they don't know exactly what it is, so they'll eat anything looking for something. In the old days, Grandma would eat clay out of the backyard, and she'll eat ashes out of the wood stove during pregnancy because she's looking for something. Well, the same thing is true. It's just by accident if somebody is looking for something and they try cigarettes, tobacco is addictive. So so it's not causative, but they can run together because they're both caused by deficiencies. And so if you recognize smoking as a red warning light, you supplement heavily, and you can actually quit smoking in 2 weeks if you really, really want to quit. So, for instance, we get people to, every time they crave a cigarette or a cigar, a pipe smoke, or chewing tobacco, they will take our liquid minerals, which has 78 different minerals in there, so we don't have to do tests to find out which one or which ones it is. We give them all 70 liquid bottle of minerals with them. We have the cherry mints and the strawberry kiwi if they like it tasting well. amazing, and they take an ounce or two of that every time they crave a cigarette or chewing tobacco. And in 2 weeks' time, it might be 10 times a day for the first couple of weeks. After a couple of weeks, it's back to everything. Okay? And the same thing is true when one is deficient in these nutrients that result in psoriasis. Again, people oftentimes have a strange appetite and addictions, which might be pain relievers they're addicted to, or smoking, or food, calories, and they can be overweight. A lot of people with psoriasis tend to be overweight, and they're indirectly related because people will eat a lot of food looking for what their body's telling them to look for. They can't find it in the food because these nutrients are no longer found in the food, and so it's not unusual for somebody who has psoriasis to be overweight.
When you travel, do you avoid certain foods at restaurants? I know you've talked about salad dressings, and I know you've talked about fried foods. Are there other foods that you avoid, like food from the Pacific Ocean, food from Washington State because of the Hanford Reservation and the radioactivity? Are there foods that you avoid because of known dangers in regional or in areas of the world?
Absolutely. And so you're hitting the nail right on the head. I mean, that's why we have this information, is to utilize it and employ it. I always tell people, if you don't make your waiter and waitress cry in the restaurant when you're ordering, you need to take a half hour to order. You need to know what's in everything that you're going to order. I mean, so it's got this, there's special spices or peppercorn spices. Well, it's only 10% peppercorn, and what's the other 90%? Okay? And so that's what you have to find out. You have to have them bring you the bag with the ingredients on it and so forth. And, talk about, you buy a bag of roasted pecans, are they dry roasted, or are they roasted in 5 different oils? So if they're dry roasted, if they're that year's pecans, they're okay. But if the heat's too high, it actually causes the oils in the nuts to oxidize and turn into trans fats, which cause cancer and plaque in your arteries. And so you would rather eat raw pecans from the area where they're grown at, as opposed to roasted pecans. And so you really have to, for instance, last night we were at a restaurant after our big event in Baltimore, Maryland, and we got a bunch of omelets and things like that. Well, I didn't get the omelets. I got poached eggs so I could see the yolks. I wanted to see the real eggs. I didn't want to be given what you would call eggs from a carton or a plastic bag, which is really 60% oils, 20% dried egg powder, and 20% wheat flour. And so I always get poached eggs when I go to these breakfast places, so I can see that they're real eggs. So when you say, I want an omelet, you don't know what you're getting. Are you getting cracked eggs? Are you getting eggs from the carton? Are you getting eggs from the plastic bag, which are 60% oil? And so you really have to be aware of those sorts of things. Because an egg is a very good food, can prevent Alzheimer's disease, prevent low T and ED and those kind of things. But if you're getting the eggs out of a carton all the time because you're on the road eating and you don't pay attention to where those, how much is oil, how much is wheat flour, and how much are real eggs, you're in trouble. And so, like I say, you have to make the waiters and waitresses cry by asking them so many questions until they're getting frustrated. But you're in the process of saving yourself and your family at the table, as opposed to letting the convenience of the cook determine what you're going to eat.
That's a really, really valid point, the convenience of the cook. I really try to avoid eating at restaurants as best I can under most circumstances. Yeah. My dad used to say something very interesting, and that was he would talk about foods that are in their natural wrappers as something that you ought to consider eating maybe more often. For example, what comes in a natural wrapper? Well, a banana does. You don't have... You can just peel it and it's ready to go. An orange, you can peel and it's ready to go. What are your thoughts about foods like that in their natural wrappers as compared to foods that are not necessarily in a natural wrapper?
Well, from the standpoint of freshness, from the standpoint of oxidation of the natural oils in them, that's very wise. Your dad was a very wise individual for that line of thinking. I haven't heard that before, but I'm glad that you were taught that by your dad. But plants, regardless of the plant, they only need 3 elements from the soil: NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And all vertebrates, including humans, need 60. And so if you're getting a plant that looks really nice and have been using Monsanto or Dow chemical fertilizers, which have only NPK in them, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, you're 57 nutrients short from a mineral standpoint. You can get vitamin C, you can get beta-carotene, which is a pre-vitamin A, and you can get energy, you can get sugar. One of the worst sugars, of course, is fructose, and of course it's found in corn syrup, but it's also found in apple juice. That's the sugar in apple juice. Apple juice is just as bad as high fructose corn syrup because that's made from fructose. And so we have babies now having to have liver transplants because they're getting fatty livers because they're eating too much fructose because grandma's picking them out on apple juice, which is fructose. At any rate, so you still have to supplement no matter how well you eat, no matter if you're observing eating foods in their natural covers, wrappers, you still don't have the nutrients in the food. And so to prevent high blood pressure, to prevent kidney failure, to prevent diabetes, to prevent obesity, to prevent dementia, to prevent Alzheimer's disease, to prevent arthritis, to prevent lupus, to prevent fibromyalgia, to prevent all these things and birth defects or everything you name, you have to supplement. There's no way you can eat well enough to get everything you need. That's our problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. I have been asked, and I'd love to hear the answer from you. So, some people have asked me, okay, so what's the difference between Dr. Wallach's longevity products like the 90 Essentials, the Beyond Tangy Tangerine, and compare that to the chain store little tiny tablet once a day type vitamin? What is the difference?
Okay, well, there's several differences, but the two big ones are this. Number one, the 90 essential nutrients are 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids. If you look at a baby formula, which should be the most critical nutrient-filled food on the market, they'll only have 12 or 15 or 18 nutrients. Not 90, 12, 15, 18. Now, in the old days, when they first came out with these baby formulas, Mama was breastfeeding the baby in the morning and the evening, and during the day when she was working on the farm or whatever, Grandma would feed the infant formula. So it was the complete source of nutrients. Okay, it was just sort of a fill-in the middle of the day, but Mom would still breastfeed the baby early in the morning and in the evening a couple of times. So the baby was getting more nutrients. Well, I mean, you're talking about baby formulas. If you don't supplement your babies, you're going to be burying them because the baby formulas don't have everything that's necessary. When you look at a one a day or a Centrum Silver, they have 26, 28 nutrients. That's not even a third of the 90. And only 12 of them might be minerals, not 60, only 12. Okay, which is about 1/4 of what they need in the form of minerals. And so it's hopeless for people to supplement with these things that are incomplete, low dose. And when I say incomplete, they only have 20%. We need 90 essential nutrients, and they have 24 nutrients out of 90. It's not even a third of the nutrients they require. Mm-hmm. And they're not in the food, so where are you going to get them? So that's where we come in. And this has taken sifting through over $100 billion worth of research in the animal industry, human nutritional health, but primarily animal industry. And it turns out that all vertebrates, whether you're a crocodile or a fish or a turtle or a human being or a flamingo or an elephant or a rat or a pig or a dog, all vertebrates require the same nutrients. They get the same disease. And I found this out by finding type 2 diabetes in crocodiles. Now, how does a crocodile get type 2 diabetes, which is supposedly a genetic disease in humans? Well, you certainly didn't need a Baptist preacher in Africa that had diabetes, got the genes that way. And it turns out when he did all the analysis, the crocodile is deficient in the same nutrients that human beings are deficient in when we have diabetes. We've known, for instance, Vincent, for 85 years that type 2 diabetes is not a genetic disease. It's actually a deficiency of a single nutrient. We've known that for 85 years. And I don't care if you've had type 2 diabetes for 30 years, getting on the diet where you're eliminating all the bad stuff, the fried foods, the processed meats, the glutens, and you're going to wind up with all these diseases if you don't supplement. And so it's imperative that people get over this thinking that they can just eat well, and here's why. I'm down to the point we're going to close the doors here. I'm going to have to shut this off. But the thing that you have to appreciate is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, everything changed. Prior to that point, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the common fuel was in the world, the universal fuel in the world was wood. And people everywhere would put wood ashes in the garden And wood ashes aren't ashes, they're the minerals. Okay, in some locations would have 15 minerals in the wood ashes, some would have 25, some would have 30. Very few had all 60, but many would have 35, 40, and people would be healthy and live longer than places that only had 3, which were the minimum requirement for the plant. Well, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, Thomas Edison pulled the switch at the first commercial electric generating plant.
Class, Dr. Joel Wallach was just on with us. He's been on with us for several Fridays, and the plan is to continue. He was at the airport and he had to run. And if you'd like to order some of the products that he's talking about, and if you'd like to chat with Jim Stewart, you can call the USA Prepares Longevity Protocol Order Hotline. Okay, you can get the protocols. You can talk with Jim Stewart, and he will help you. 417-863-7149. 417-863-7149. Jim Stewart's traveled with Dr. Joel Wallach. He's been at many of the seminars and presentations. He's traveled with me. He's been here to the farm. He's been at the meetups. He's been at the expos. We know him well. So if you'd like to order products through Jim Stewart, he will help you. No pressure. 417-863-7149. Thank you, Dr. Wallach and Jim Stewart. This hour and the remainder of this segment, we've got Marty Laura Barrett with us. She's called in many times over the years, and you know her as Laura. Marty's with us, Marty Laura Barrett, and we're going to call her Marty. Welcome, Marty.
Hi, how are you?
I am well. And you know, Marty, we have, over the years, you and I have stayed in touch, and we've chatted and we've talked about all kinds of things. And for a couple decades, you have been an instructor in front of the classroom. You've been teaching the hard sciences at the college level. You've seen changes. You've seen what's happening at the college level. You've seen the changes in the administrations, the management, and changes with the students. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what's happening in the classroom, what the changes are, and as you see them as a professional educator. Now, one of the things that I see is I believe that your parents, although I've never met them, I've heard stories about them over the years, and they're all wonderful stories. Your parents, I believe, were pretty strict. My parents were pretty strict. I knew the guidelines. I knew how far I could go before I'd be in trouble. And the last thing I wanted to be in trouble with was my parents. What's different? Is that true?
Definitely.
And today it's not. Today, parents are pretty darn lenient. I mean, I see wild children, and I'm thinking, you know, of what Mark Twain said. I wish I had half ownership in that child. Why? Because I'd shoot my half.
Well, you're right about my upbringing. I think parents in our era were kind of strict. There were set rules, and you had no doubt you were going to follow them. If you got in trouble at school, you faced a worse punishment when you got home. And parents weren't particularly caring about kids' emotions or feelings. Kids in those days weren't justifiable beings yet until they were adults. And even showing your emotions, I remember, was a problem. One of my mother's favorite phrases was, you know, I'll give you something to cry about. And you don't want to hear that. So, you know, parents weren't warm and fuzzy then. So we grew up in kind of this strict environment, but felt loved. And we swung the pendulum the other way. Now, at least I know I'm guilty of this. I care about how my kids think and how they feel. And, you know, some of the things in their childhood that might have been traumatic to them, I tried to shield them from those kind of events. And I think we've kind of created a monster in the other respect. Now we're a little too lax and too easy on our kids, to be honest. Do you feel that way about your upbringing?
Well, I feel that my parents were strict, yes, as you say. As far as our children, I let them learn lessons. I tried to teach them that, You can learn lessons the hard way, or you can learn it through others. Sometimes you have to learn it the hard way. Sometimes I let them learn it the hard way. But I see some miserable behavior, absolutely miserable behavior in some young people today, and to the point where I just can't stand being around them. I mean, literally. I'm even making comments in the store like, geez, listen to that child. That child's out of control. That parent should be doing something. Obviously, the parent's not paying attention. And I've got a little story I'd like to share with you about this woman and her cell phone and the relationship when we come back. Marty Barrett's with us. We're talking about education. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Marty Barrett's with us, and we're talking about education today. And I was mentioning in the last segment as a response to what Marty had said about parents and the attention that parents are paying to the children. It seems to be different today from when she and I were growing up in the 1950s, 1960s. Marty, I was reading an article this morning, and I know you've seen these. Class, in the cities, you'll see these businesses on the city streets, and they have sidewalks in front of them. But to get to the basement of these buildings, they would have these steel doors in the sidewalk. And what would happen is these steel doors would be about 5 feet deep and maybe almost 5 feet wide, and they would open up in the center. So they'd be a bifold door. And normally a bell would ring and signaling that something's going to happen. The doors would very slowly open up. And by opening up, the hinges would be on the outside of the doors, and it would prevent a person from falling into the hole, which would be the stairwell down into the basement. So you would walk from the sidewalk through these open doors into the basement of the business. Okay? Well, there was a woman, 67 years old. She was on her cell phone, obviously distracted, obviously not paying attention. She walked, and it wasn't like it was crowded. She was the only one walking in this direction. I saw the video. So she walks right into the door, falls over the door, and falls down 6 feet into the basement. It took 8, 9, 10 firemen to get her out. Serious injuries. She went head over heels right over the top of this door. Now, the door had to be at least 2.5 feet tall that she had to fall over. So she walked right into it, fell into the basement stairs. Now, what I'm saying is that is indicative of what is happening. You've read the stories. I'm sure you've heard the stories of parents who are saying, don't bother me. I'm busy. I'm doing Facebook right now. I'm busy. Don't bother me. I can't help. I can't do it. You're on your own for your homework. Leave me alone. That's the kind of thing that I believe is happening in way too many households where the parents have abandoned their responsibility to take care of their children. They're not paying attention. And this moment that I talked about where this 67-year-old woman dives through her own stupidity, not paying attention. Obviously, something was more important. And if you look at what's happening in Europe, in Germany, the problem is so great. Pedestrians on the sidewalk are getting run over by automobiles on the street. Why? Because they're looking down at their cell phones, and they're walking right into the intersections and getting hit by traffic. So what did Germany do? They're embedding traffic lights in the sidewalk, so you don't even have to look up anymore. You just keep looking down at your cell phone. Hopefully you'll see the red light, the yellow light, or the green light in front of you as you take steps down the sidewalk. This is nuts.
My cousin is a policeman, and he got the job for an entire weekend, got paid overtime to stand in front of a manhole where there were already barriers around, cones and wires and such, to make sure nobody fell in that manhole. He said he made enough money to redo his bathroom off of a weekend of just standing there.
Wow.
I'm not happy that my money's going to that.
So
what we're changing society.
Yeah, and I think that was your point. So are you saying that we've gone too far, and we're, maybe our parents were a little strict, and I'm thinking my parents were okay with. I think I turned out okay. I know right from wrong. I have not been arrested for anything that I've done, and I actually haven't been arrested. So I think my parents did a good job, and I know, based on your character, your parents did a good job. Do you think that we've gone way too far the other way? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I don't know how it was when you were a kid as far as sports, But kids my era, the kids that got trophies were the ones that won the whole championship.
That's right.
My kids have so many trophies, it looks like they're star athletes, whereas none of them are very good at sports. But everybody gets a trophy. They don't realize that, only the winners get it. The ones that get the trophies, they're the last winner. We called them losers in my day. And I finally found a need for these old trophies. I found a school that teaches disabled children was looking for old trophies. They're going to snap off the bat and whatever else and put the kid's name on it, and he thinks he got a trophy for being good that day at school. So I donated bags of trophies as though my kids were professional athletes. And even now in school, in elementary school, you know how it was your birthday, your mom made cupcakes for the whole class.
Yes.
Now, if there's a kid with some kind of food allergy, which there probably is, overall the whole school, whether there is or isn't, you have to bring in things like pencils or whistles or something non-edible. I think it's time for the kid with a gluten allergy to realize he has to eat differently, and maybe he has to bring his own snack that day. Other than the whole world changing for that one child's allergy.
You know, you mentioned something that I find fascinating. One of our instructors is a dentist. His name is Dr. Howard Shane. He's been on the air with us. He's done seminars at the Get Prepared Expos. He's a brilliant, brilliant dentist. And one day he said to me, and put a smile on my face, he said, Vinny, what do you call the guy who graduates last in medical school? What do you call that guy who graduates? Okay, what is
Doctor. Doctor.
You're absolutely right. Doctor. And he's right. He's right. So let's talk about these cell phones. And cell phones are a pet peeve of mine. I object to the fact that when I'm talking to someone, you know, he or she may pull out a cell phone. It's like, wait a minute. That's rude. It didn't ring. I mean, it hasn't rung in, you know, about 3 minutes so far. And you're pulling this thing out. And it's insulting. It's not good behavior. But people now feel that they've got to check their cell phones for messages. Now, how does that impact the classroom today?
A great deal. I would say almost no students less than the age of 40 go through the entire class without at least glancing at their phone. And sometimes
are you talking about per class?
Yes. Everybody looks at least a sly eye on their phone, just make sure nobody's trying to contact them, something exciting's not happening that they're missing out on. And it surprises me. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. What's going on at 8 o'clock in the morning that they need to see? It's upsetting. And what's really upsetting is the fact that when I take a break in a class, no one talks to each other. No one moves. They just sit there and they're texting on their phone. They have no idea who the guy is next to them or don't care. It's not real conversation. And, of course, we know without that I wouldn't have met you. So good thing cell phones weren't around then. You got to know your fellow students.
Yes.
And there's no communication anymore like that.
Marty, I can tell you that the time that we spent walking to class together, you know, walking from across the quad, time we spent in the various cafeterias across campus, you know, time that we spent together, not 1 second of that, those great times that we spent together were interrupted by a cell phone. Not 1 second.
I remember my dad in high school saying, got a dime, as I left the door. You know, just making sure I had a dime to call if I needed help. Now you're at a second's notice, and you have to be up on all
Dr.
the news.
Norman Shealy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and we don't even know if some of that news is even accurate. Dr. Norman Shealy has a very interesting comment about cell phones, and he said on air, and he said to me privately on the telephone, he refuses to be on tap 24 hours a day because someone else just feels they ought to contact him. He refuses to be interrupted 24 hours a day at someone else's whim just because they're bored. And I'm wondering, in the classroom, We're talking about the college classroom now. How many of those students are interrupted by a text that says, "What are you doing?" I'm in class. So
in a large lecture hall, I would say a fourth of the students at least. And this is 8 o'clock in the morning. I would assume a lot of their friends are sleeping still.
Okay, so they're paying, somebody's paying for these classes, right? They're paying X amount of money per hour to be there. And they are allowing themselves to waste that money by being distracted by some numbskull who's got nothing to do.
Right. Now, I get some students that are very polite, and they go up to me and say, you know, I'm waiting for a call back from the pediatrician. If I get a call, I'll run out. I have to take it. Or their husband's overseas, and they're never sure when he's going to be calling, so if he calls, they're going to run out. Those kind of things are perfectly understandable. But the other 98% of them are just, you know, want to go for coffee after class. You know, that kind of call that could certainly wait.
What about using the cell phone for cheating? You know, I'm sure that your time as a hard sciences instructor is spent preventing the cheating, which will reflect negatively later on should that person get a job that they're dependent on knowing the knowledge that they should have learned in class. How much of your time is spent preventing cheating from cell phones? Or is
a lot of it, both in person and online. In person, cell phones have gotten so slim that they can just sneak it between their knees while they're taking their test and frequently look at it. I always inform them that I consider proper test-taking etiquette to have your hands on the table at all times. I don't want to see anybody fussing in their lap. But it's still difficult to tell. And online is a whole other thing.
You know, let's talk about that. Let's talk about online classes. What's going on with that? I don't want to take a class online. I would really like to have some time with my instructor where I can raise my hand and ask those questions that are important to me and maybe to others. And the interaction with my fellow students. Marty Barrett's with us. She's been an educator, professional educator at the college level for over a couple decades, and we're talking about education today. Marty, one of the terms that's used for online learning has been distance learning. I'm really not interested in distance learning. I mean, I have a number of courses by the teaching company, which I think are excellent, but it really, to me, is not a substitute for being in class. What are your thoughts about online learning? What are the problems?
Well, one of the problems is some deans want to make every course available online. At my institution, they're talking about making chemistry lab online, where your mouse directs a little dropper to put the reagents in. You know, no real contact with anything. I don't want one of those chemists working in my lab that's never touched a real reagent. And another problem is cheating online. I give my exams, and they're unproctored. They take them at their own house, so they could ask somebody else. They can look back at their notes. They can Google. There's no guarantee that any of that is really measuring their learning. Now, with some courses like calculus, they allow us to pay a proctoring program where they're like videotaped as they take the test. And someone has to, what a boring job, look at all those students taking the test to make sure they're not using other sources of information. But that's expensive, and they're not going to do that for every course. So you're at the mercy of trying to figure out how can you best prepare your students and how can you best assess their learning when they're outside of your site altogether. It's a real challenge.
Marty, I'm thinking back to the 70s when you and I were side by side in the chemistry lab at the university. And I'm thinking back to you're adding drops of reagents and us looking at the reactions. So one of us, let's say you would add yours first, and I'd look over, wow, and then I'll see if mine does the same thing. And we could repeat the experiment, and we could verify that it's doing what we think it's doing. We've just verified it. Now, how is that possible when you're clicking your mouse and you're dropping online? Let me just back up and let me just do it again. It's different. It's not the same. It's not hands-on. It's remote.
And they're so used to video games that
I don't think
something blowing up or something is not any need for caution. That's what happens in video games. So the reality, I saw a fire in an organic chemistry lab.
That's what I'm talking about.
Not doing the right thing.
We had smells, right? We had smells. We'd say, wait a minute, something's really wrong over there. Wow. And we'd all pay attention to that.
And graded sometimes.
Do they have online fire extinguishers?
They don't need them. They can burn the whole place down. It's not a problem. It's just another
Just hit the
video
reset
game.
button.
Yeah, exactly. And when you talk about the reset button,
and is
I get
tuition
students both in class and online that say, I didn't do very well on that test. I would like to take it again. I mean, since when is that an option? Yeah, I said, well, no, you took the test.
I don't ever
used to class where they take them multiple times. Yeah, I don't think we ever did that.
I'm not.
We?
I can't. No. If you did lousy on a test, oh well, you did lousy. Better do better next time. Otherwise, you keep doing lousy and you're out of school. Yep. And I guess that ties to what you were saying about the everyone's a winner. Everyone's a winner now, and if you don't do well, if you don't get at least a passing grade on that test, take it again. So is that up to the instructor, or is that up to the university or the college that lets the students take them again and again and again?
It depends.
The test.
It's up to the instructor normally, but if a student has accommodations, meaning they have some sort of learning disability, they can give a paper to the teacher that says exactly what they need. And it may be exam retakes. It may be twice as much time on exams. It might mean they can have a calculator when no one else is allowed to have one. And I agree with all that, the ADA specifications, but I don't agree with it. I teach some students that are future nurses. Shouldn't they be able to react quickly to an emergency instead of saying, well, I have accommodations. It'll take me twice as long to figure out why you're not breathing anymore.
Marty Barrett's with us. Marty, we've homeschooled our children, and one of our boys wanted to study at the university. And so he wanted to take some courses over the summer. And he was very, very young at the time, and, younger than the other students in his class. And one of the boys who had been to our farm and our son had been to his house, they spent some time together. They were friends. But this other boy was a little older, and had accommodations for his education. He got extra time. He got extra time to study. He got extra time to take tests. He got tutors that were provided by the university. He got to take retests. And it just frosted our son, because our son was younger than everybody else in the class and didn't get any of those special considerations. Now, do you see that some of these considerations are just not necessary? Yes.
I even, as myself, I have a handicap where, as a child, it was my job to figure out how to make life work, especially at school. Nowadays, a child like myself would have an aide that followed them around. And they could tell the aide, go get me another milk in the cafeteria. And the aide would have to scurry off and wait on you. Well, when you're an adult, nobody wants to hire you and your aide. So they're creating a population of people that are unemployable. I think it's your job to fit in, and your job to figure out how you're going to fit in. And if you have a learning disability, certain careers are not good for you, where you have to respond quickly and really think on your feet. And that's not emphasized nowadays. Anybody can do anything they want, is how it's viewed. So,
Marty, did you? Okay. When you were and I were at the university, did you get extra time to travel between classes? Did you got no extra time? You were on the same schedule as everybody else, even though it was difficult for you to walk from one class to another. Correct?
Yes, and that's. I think that's the way it should be. It should be your responsibility to figure out how you're going to fit in life. Not life has to the whole planet has to change to accommodate you. It's not healthy that way. And I think it helped me to figure out how things should work, rather than having them orchestrated already.
Marty, I can tell you this. You know, we talk on the phone. I don't know, sometimes every 3 months, sometimes every 6 months, and
you're a hard guy to get a hold of.
and I know that you contacted me and you wondered if I was incarcerated because
I always look at the Missouri News, just making sure.
So, but here's the point I'm trying to get to. In all of the conversations that we've had over the decades, not once have you ever said, "Woe is me." Not once have you ever said, you know, how's it going? Good. How's it going? And I'll have to pry to find out, and then I'll find out that, you know, you're on your stomach, or because you got sores from surgery after surgery, and I never, Marty, I have never heard you complain. I have never heard you say, "Woe is me." I've never heard anything like that. And I can't think of a summer that you have not had a surgery. Has there been one?
The last couple have been good, but other than that, no. I've kind of lost count, but it's over 30 operations, and I don't let it dictate my life. In fact, last time I was in a hospital bed in the living room, the kids brought home a puppy and said, "Mom, can we keep this puppy?" And put a puppy on the hospital bed, and I thought, yeah, you can keep her. I have trouble with those animal wishes. I agree to all of them. So I have a nice life. I enjoy my life.
When students talk to you, do they complain about the breadth of the material that you cover and then test them on? Is it a problem for them that they have to think wide and deep? Yes.
They want to be tested on every chapter individually and then forget that stuff and go on to the next. And they also don't like having to answer critical thinking kind of questions that are not all that tough. Like if I go over the function of a hormone and I ask the question, what would happen if I inhibit the action of that gland? They all come up and say, "What's inhibit mean? Does that mean stop or go?" You know,
are you kidding me?
No, nobody knows. And it's not the foreign students that are asking me; it's the American students. And one of my coworkers said the reason we see this perhaps is because the students of today that just coming out of high school are the ones from No Child Left Behind. They've been moved along regardless of their progress. And I get an occasional student that I think to get them where they should be, they'd have to go back to third grade. And here they are in college. And it's a hard job trying to teach them basic things that have nothing to do with the subject matter just so they can have a chance to learn the information. It challenges
Marty, you just said something that stunned me. I just sat back in my studio chair after you said this. All this time, I'm thinking of George Bush, No Child Left Behind. I thought that the intent of that was to make sure that every child learns the appropriate amount of information, will be prepared for school, will be prepared for the next progression, the next grade in series, that no child will have a lack of knowledge going forward. What you just said was absolutely right. We're not going to leave him behind. We're going to keep moving.
Yeah.
Regardless of his inabilities, regardless of his lack of knowledge, regardless of his understanding.
That's what
he
happened.
hit the nail right on the head.
And unless the parents have some input into that, if you come from a broken home or just parents that can't be bothered, you just get pushed along and you end up unable to do adult work.
I know a young man, one of our boys decided he wanted to try being trained at the public training camp, public school. And I decided I was going to learn how this school works. As my dad was an educator and my mom worked in the president's office of a college, I had an understanding as to how school should be. And so I visited the school, and what I saw I was appalled at. And I volunteered to fix all the computers and to get the IT portion of the school working properly, because it wasn't working properly. And they thought they'd bring me on as someone who could help them, since I knew a little bit about computers. What I saw was appalling. And I called up our son's friend's parents. And I know this young man to today. I see him not often, but I see him. I was appalled at what they were doing. And they put this young man in special ed. They put him in like a learning disabilities class. He did not have a learning disability. But what they were doing was dumbing down his education. And I believe they were doing that because I believe that the school gets extra compensation for these kinds of children. So it behooves the school to have more free and reduced lunches because the school gets extra money. I believe they get more compensation for children who require extra effort to educate, which means they give less education, but they have more teaching people, if you will, or more aides, or more bodies around, more adult bodies around these young people who are considered students. Well, this young man today, even though I called his parents and said, look, I will take your child to school. I'll make sure he gets to and from school. I will do that from now on for the rest of his high school days. And this was a couple of years worth. And parents said, no, he's doing fine. So now this young man works at a factory.
Yeah.
He's got to wear hearing protection. He's working with machines that can crush his hands at a moment's notice through an accident or inattention or something, a distraction. This man is in harm's way, and it could have been better than that.
Well, I had an example kind of like that, where when my son was first learning keyboarding, they call it now, instead of typing, they had a placemat mimicking the keys on a computer. It was not a computer. They were practicing typing on a piece of paper with letters on it. And I went to the principal and I said, I work, so I can't come in and serve lunch and be in my kid's classroom a lot, but I can maybe write a grant to get you some computers. So tell me exactly what you want, the specifications, what kind of memory and everything you need, and I'll see what I can do. Well, it turns out I found somebody who was giving away computers, like 40 of them, that exactly matched their qualifications. So I called the principal and said, I got these computers. We can get them right now. And he said, I would have to run it through the school board as a formal vote. Okay, call the school board members. No, we don't have a meeting till next month. I can't contact them early. And we don't want the computers now because if there's something wrong with them, we'd have to pay for their disposal. And I said, I'll pay for the disposal if they're not right, because I'm pretty sure they are. And they wouldn't take the new computers. They went to somebody else because of silly red tape. And they went back to typing on a piece of paper.
And you don't get the tactile feel. You don't get the tactile, the biological feel. Typing on a piece of paper that does not give is different from typing on a key that actually can be depressed.
And you don't see if you have an error.
It's absolutely ridiculous what happened in that situation. Let's talk about what the administration wants when we come back. Management.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Class, if you're ever wondering what a telephone call not on the air is like with me and Marty Barrett, this is exactly what it's like. Marty, I mentioned to you that it'd be just you and me talking and a few people listening in. And isn't that what this is? This is what we're like on the phone. Marty, what does management want from the instructors? What are they looking for?
They want innovative teaching. They want flipped classrooms is a big term nowadays. And what they mean by that is the students should read and learn on their own. And coming into class is where you discuss it, answer questions, role play, different activities for them. But there's a problem with this, especially in the hard sciences. They're not putting in the work. And part of it's because all my students, I work at a community college, All of them either have families or work sometimes full-time and going to school full-time. They don't either have the time or the desire to put in that much time. So coming to class and discussing what they should have learned would be horrible. And also, they say we should do things like role play. I find it hard to think like, okay, you be the kidney, I'll be the liver, and we'll talk about the digestion or something. It works for some disciplines, not for others.
Yeah, maybe sociology or something like that. But hard sciences,
Right.
I totally agree with you.
You got to get the facts down.
Now, let's talk about tenure. What is your opinion on tenure?
Well, I have tenure, and I'm taking advantage of it, but I think in general it's a bad idea. I would like to think that they would like to keep me anyway, that I do a good job and work hard and care about the students. I don't think I would need tenure. And sometimes tenure is bad, because if you're up for tenure and you don't get it, you're forced to leave. And sometimes administrations at schools decide, we're not going to give everybody tenure. That would make us look not very powerful. So we'll look at the candidates and we'll give tenure to half of them, and the other half we won't. Maybe that's for some minor reason. I know one of my friend's son is a history teacher, and he did not get tenure, and one of the students he dealt with that he had to call the parents on was a grandchild of a school board member. So maybe that one event determined his career options. So now he's out. So, and also,
Have you ever...
people with tenure sometimes don't try very hard. Once I got tenure, they can't get rid of me.
When I was teaching at the high school level, the term tenure came up very, very early in the discussion days of what I would be doing. And I said, I do not want tenure. And they looked at me like, really? What teacher doesn't want tenure? And I said, well, tenure to me would mean that I could do less. I wouldn't have to try as hard. I wouldn't have to be the best I could be. I could get by with much less. And I'd have this safety net. So I don't want it. If I don't earn my keep today, you should fire me, today. If I, what I did in the past, that was nice, but I already got paid for that. We already settled that account. I got paid, last week for last week's work, if you will. That should not be the reason why you keep me. I should continue to do a good job in order to earn my keep. And that's how I felt about that. And that was kind of, that was unusual. They'd never seen that before. Have you ever been threatened by a student in any way? Reprisals? How does that work?
I had a student who works for the IRS, and he was kind of dangling between a C and a D. And he said, if I don't get a C, I'm going to make sure you're audited. And I said, knock yourself out. I don't do anything wrong. But I submitted a report to security so that if I did get audited, I had a record that threat took place.
What an outrage. What an
Really?
outrage. I had two parents come in. A student was actually, did really, really well on all the other classes, but not mine. Parents wanted to know what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
Well, the student what really happened was I believe that student got extra favors in terms of grades because of who her daddy was. He was a big
likely.
shot, a real big shot. It didn't work for me. Didn't work for me. Marty Barrett, thanks so much for spending your time with us. Thank you so much.
Just like old times.